Welcome to NZ Pocket Guide, New Zealand's largest travel guide. Visit nzpocketguide.com for thousands of tips, hidden gems, and ways to plan the perfect trip in New Zealand. This is a readout of an article available for free on the website. Check out the link in the description and let's get started. The Travel Guide to New Zealand on a Budget. How to plan a budget trip to New Zealand. New Zealand. It's a country of two main islands, the North Island and the South Island, renowned for its diverse natural landscapes that too few places have preserved. The convenience of such sublime scenery is that you can't put a price on it. That's what makes traveling New Zealand so ideal for a budget getaway, after airfares, of course, because, yes, New Zealand is pretty isolated. Many of the country's natural wonders are free to visit. All you need to do is plan a budget trip to New Zealand using affordable transport, accommodation, food and other nifty tips that we give in this travel guide to New Zealand on a budget. About New Zealand. Location. New Zealand is a country in the Oceania continent. It's located in the South Pacific Ocean, about 1,500 kilometers, 930 miles, east of Australia and around 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles, south of the South Pacific Islands. Climate. New Zealand has a diverse climate determined by the ocean, mountains and prevailing winds. The mean average temperatures are 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, in the South Island to 16 degrees Celsius, 61 degrees Fahrenheit, in the North Island. Time zone, UTC/GMT +12. Population, 5 million. Languages, English, Māori and New Zealand Sign Language. Size, 268,021 square kilometers, 103,483 mi2 in total. It is approximately 1,600 kilometers, 990 miles, long and around 400 kilometers, 250 miles, at its widest point. How to get to New Zealand on a budget. First of all, be sure to check if you are actually able to travel to New Zealand. After the COVID-19 outbreak, the border restrictions for New Zealand have been constantly evolving. We find that the best source for up-to-date travel information is the New Zealand government-run website covid19.government.nz. With that out of the way, what's the best way to travel to New Zealand? Most travelers on a budget get to New Zealand via the skies. Direct flights to New Zealand can be found in the US, Canada, South America, Asia, Australia and the South Pacific Islands. Coming further afield from destinations such as in Europe, and you'll need to catch at least one connecting flight. See our complete guide on how to get to New Zealand. Otherwise, here's a quick rundown. Flight times to New Zealand. Argentina, 12 hours 30 minutes, Brazil, 15 hours 30 minutes, Canada, 16 hours 30 minutes, China, 13h 30 min, Denmark, 22 hours, Finland, 20 hours, France, 23 hours 30 minutes, Germany, 22 hours 30 minutes, Hong Kong, 11 hours, Israel, 32 hours, Italy, 22 hours 30 minutes, Japan, 11 hours, Korea, 12 hours, Malaysia, 11 hours, Netherlands, 22 hours 30 minutes, Philippines, 10 hours 30 minutes, Singapore, 10 hours 30 minutes, Sweden, 21 hours, Taiwan, 11 hours, United Kingdom, 22 hours 30 minutes, USA-12 hours, Vietnam, 12 hours 30 minutes. The cheapest times to fly to New Zealand. Airfares depend on different factors: what time of year you choose to fly, how long in advance you book, where you're flying from, what type of ticket you get, and the route you take to get to New Zealand. While specific money-saving airfare tips are virtually impossible in the ever-changing climate, we have a few general tips to keep in mind. The cheapest time to fly to New Zealand is during New Zealand's spring, winter and autumn months, between July and November. Summer and particularly around Christmas is the most expensive time to fly to New Zealand. It is also usually cheaper to fly at inconvenient times of the day such as late at night or during the early hours of the morning, as well as midweek rather than on weekends. Having a flexible travel plan allows you to choose the cheapest flights. A note on customs declarations. New Zealand has strict biosecurity measures at the border to stop unwanted pests and diseases from entering the country. With that, anyone arriving in New Zealand is asked to declare any risk items they have in their luggage. This includes common items like food and sports gear. Failing to declare such items can incur an instant $400 fine, not a good way to start a budget holiday. Be sure to read up on everything you need to know about arriving in a New Zealand airport so that you are prepared. When to visit New Zealand? With the notion that New Zealand has 4 seasons in a day, i.e. the weather is very changeable even in summer, we do not recommend planning your trip too much around the weather. Nevertheless, here is what you can typically expect in each season. Summer, December to February. Summer is the warmest time of year, reaching highs of 25 degrees Celsius, 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Expect finer days than during the rest of the year. Autumn, March to May. Autumn has milder temperatures, anywhere between 6 degrees Celsius, 43 degrees Fahrenheit, and 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Weather patterns start to become more interchangeable with a few more rainy days than summer. Winter, June to August. Temperatures can be anywhere between -3 degrees Celsius, 27 degrees Fahrenheit, and 15 degrees Celsius, 59 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on which parts of the country you are in. Snow falls in alpine regions and rainfall is more frequent. Spring, September to November. Temperatures rise again during this shoulder season, where lows are 2 degrees Celsius, 36 degrees Fahrenheit, and highs are 17 degrees Celsius, 63 degrees Fahrenheit. Expect a balance of fine and rainy days. The best time to visit New Zealand on a budget. When choosing a time to visit New Zealand when it's the cheapest, avoid visiting in summer, December to February. This is the most popular time to visit. With that, flights, tours and rentals tend to be more expensive. Visiting in any of the shoulder seasons, i.e. from March to May and from September to November, brings warmer weather than winter along with more affordable travel deals. The off-season, i.e. winter, is the cheapest time to travel with the exception of visiting some of the ski resort towns, such as Queenstown, Wanaka and Ohakune. What to pack for New Zealand? Just a large backpack or suitcase with a day pack is all you need for New Zealand. There's no need to go too crazy. New Zealand has plenty of shops and services should you need anything while you're traveling. A quick packing list. The key to packing lightly for New Zealand is versatile outfits. New Zealand tends to lean more toward the casual style, rather than fashion. Some handy items to remember include leggings/sweatpants/hiking pants, shorts for warmer days, sweater/hoodie/mid-layer, hiking shoes, flip-flops, swimwear, thermal underlayer, top and or bottoms, waterproof and windproof jacket, woolen socks, a warm jacket, winter/spring/autumn, a selection of light tops, underwear, toiletries including a mini first aid kit, sunscreen and insect repellent, New Zealand travel adapter, camera/phone, electronic device chargers. Extra batteries are a good idea. If you plan on camping, pack a lightweight tent and sleeping mat, and or staying in huts, a 4-season sleeping bag and a torch/flashlight. Get the full list in the New Zealand packing list, What to Pack for New Zealand on nzpocketguide.com. New Zealand visas. A tourist/visitor visa for New Zealand activates automatically upon entry to New Zealand for most countries, usually allowing visitors to stay for up to 3 months. Visitors also need to pay for NZTA and IVL before arrival in New Zealand. Other popular visa options to stay in New Zealand longer are the working holiday visa and student visas. Travel insurance for New Zealand. Although the ACC in New Zealand partly covers accidental injury medical bills, many travellers opt for travel insurance for extra peace of mind. Identification. Your passport is obviously coming to New Zealand with you. For driving, bring your driving license. If your driving license is not written in English, then it will need to be accompanied by an international driving permit. Note that there are only 3 valid forms of ID to buy alcohol in New Zealand, so consider getting a Hospitality New Zealander 18+ card if you are staying in New Zealand for a while. New Zealand currency. The currency in New Zealand is New Zealand dollars, NZD. There are plenty of ATMs in towns and cities where you'll be able to withdraw cash. Credit cards are also widely accepted, however, there is a small fee with each credit card overseas transaction. If you are staying in New Zealand for a few months, you will save a lot of money by opening a New Zealand bank account. How long should a trip to New Zealand be? Unlike many destinations, New Zealand's attractions are spread out across the country. Therefore, you will want to travel around, which takes time. In addition, spending as little amount of time in New Zealand as possible can seem like the obvious way to spend less, but an extended trip on a working holiday visa, for instance, allows you to save money by working for accommodation or getting a job. Whether you're seeking a short budget trip or a gap year, our tips for different time frames in New Zealand below should help. 1 to 2 weeks in New Zealand. Within this time, you should explore just one of the main islands. 3 to 4 weeks in New Zealand. There are a number of bus tours that allow you to see both islands in this time frame, or you can rent a vehicle. Just over a month. Take a hop-on hop-off bus or intercity bus around both islands, or rent a vehicle following our New Zealand budget itinerary sample available for free on nzpocketguide.com under the Trip Idea tab. 2 months, 1 year. Now you have the option to travel by bus or by your own car to see a great deal of the country. Check out our 30 tips for backpacking in New Zealand for advice on an extended trip to New Zealand on a budget. Budget transport around New Zealand. There's no right or wrong way to get around New Zealand. It depends on your personal style, budget, and what experience you want to get out of it. Here are your most wallet-friendly options. National coaches. This is the cheapest way of getting from A to B. Intercity forms the most extensive public transport network in the country. Hop-on hop-off buses. These are flexible bus tours on a set route with the option to hop off at any point for as long as you wish. Activities and accommodation are optional and pay as you go. Rent a car. Renting a car provides freedom for independent travel. There are budget car rentals available, with some recommendation on our website. Rent a camper van. Make your vehicle your accommodation by renting a camper van. However, with camping restrictions and the need to recharge some vehicles, there are extra costs to take into consideration. Buy your own vehicle. Second-hand cars and camper vans are easy to buy and sell in New Zealand, working out to be very cost-effective if you plan to stay in New Zealand for a while. Bus tours. These are structured tours around New Zealand, often with some food and accommodation included. It's a stress-free way to travel the country with other people. While not the cheapest, they can offer good value for money. Domestic flights. While not as popular as other countries, domestic flights in New Zealand are only a good idea for traveling long distances or between the North and South Islands. Ferries. There are ferry services in New Zealand to get between the mainland and offshore islands, as well as between the North and South Islands. Where to go in New Zealand? New Zealand has a vast number of destinations across the North Island, South Island, and other offshore islands. Here are some of our favorite. North Island. Bay of Islands for its islands and beaches. Auckland for its volcanoes and city life. Rotorua for its geothermal activity and Māori culture. Okune, Tongariro, for its volcanic landscapes. Taranaki for its volcanoes and surf. Wellington for its capital city vibes. South Island. Picton Budget for its water activities. Nelson/Abel Tasman for its beaches and forest. Kaikoura Budget for its marine wildlife. Franz Joseph Glacier for its glaciers. Queenstown for its adrenaline activities. Aoraki Mount Cook for its mountains. Stewart Island for its remote wilderness and wildlife. And that's just the hotspots. We encourage you to explore other destinations in our budget destinations guides. Things to do in New Zealand. Spoiled. You are spoiled. New Zealand has so much to do that we could barely fit it all in our 101 things to do in New Zealand, the ultimate list. Budget activities in New Zealand. Sticking to a budget is easy thanks to the overwhelming array of free activities. Just check out the 50 best free things to do in New Zealand for an idea. In short, New Zealand's free and budget activities include hikes/short walks to natural attractions, wildlife viewing, free hot pools, museums, art galleries, gardens, markets, glowworm caves, geothermal parks and more. For those willing to spend a little, affordable attractions include New Zealand's bird sanctuaries, brewery tours, wine tastings, mountain biking, kayaking, farm tours and much more. Budget accommodation in New Zealand. New Zealand offers many forms of budget accommodation across the country. Stay in cheap accommodation, preferably with self-catering facilities, so you can save money on food. It's the easiest way to keep the costs down. Hostels. Stay in shared dorms or private rooms where you'll share facilities, such as a kitchen, laundry and bathrooms with other guests. Holiday parks. Stay in motel units, private cabins, backpacker dorm cabins, tent sites or powered sites for campervans at this popular type of New Zealand accommodation. Campsites. Campsites are where you can pitch a tent or park a campervan overnight. Budget hotels and motels. Hotel and motel prices are sporadic in New Zealand, but there are some offering budget private rooms out there. Homestays. Stay with a local in a spare room listed on booking websites like booking.com, Expedia and Airbnb. Other cheap accommodation ideas. Couchsurfing, campervans, woofing, work for accommodation, house sitting, food shopping and eating out. New Zealand mostly has westernized food, including fried food like fish and chips, burgers and pizzas. You can, however, find much more culturally diverse food, especially in larger towns and cities. Eating out for travelers on a budget. Eating out is notoriously expensive in New Zealand, typically costing between NZD $20.30 per person for a main, and that's without a drink. Be choosy when you eat out, perhaps by following our New Zealand foodie guides for each town and city across New Zealand. Self-catering in New Zealand. Many accommodations have cooking facilities, so there's no excuse to not enjoy a self-catering holiday in New Zealand. Buying groceries is much cheaper than eating out, so it's highly recommended for budget travelers. Typical food prices in supermarkets are as follows. 1 litre, 35 fluid ounces of milk, $2 New Zealand dollars and 40 cents. A dozen eggs, $5 New Zealand dollars and 40 cents. 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds of rice, $2 New Zealand dollars. 500 grams, 1.1 pounds, pasta, $1 New Zealand dollar and 20 cents. A loaf of sliced bread, $1 New Zealand dollar and 20 cents. 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds, cheese, 11 New Zealand dollars. 100 grams, 3.5 ounces, dry freeze coffee, 7 New Zealand dollars. 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds of apples, 5 New Zealand dollars. 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds of bananas, 3 New Zealand dollars. 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds of tomatoes, 10 New Zealand dollars. 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds of onions, 2 New Zealand dollars. 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds of chicken, 13 New Zealand dollars. 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds of beef mince, 13 New Zealand dollars. So, what is the budget for a trip to New Zealand? Even in the category of budget travelers, we all travel and live very differently, making a precise budget for our millions of readers an impossible task. Nevertheless, you can work out your own needs with this list. Transport budget. Hop on hop off bus national pass per year, 1,000 New Zealand dollars to 2,000 New Zealand dollars. National coach bus per 4-hour trip, 30 New Zealand dollars to 80 New Zealand dollars. Second-hand car, 15 plus years old, 2,000 New Zealand dollars to 5,000 New Zealand dollars. Car hire per day, 30 New Zealand dollars to 150 New Zealand dollars. Used two-person campervan, 15 plus years old, 3,500 New Zealand dollars to 15,000 New Zealand dollars. Two-person campervan hire per day, 60 New Zealand dollars to 260 New Zealand dollars. Petrol/litre, 0.3 gallons, 1 New Zealand dollar and 90 cents to 2 New Zealand dollars and 20 cents. Domestic flights per one way, 50 New Zealand dollars to 240 New Zealand dollars. Train per one way, 100 New Zealand dollars to 260 New Zealand dollars. Accommodation budget. Hostel dorm bed per night, 27 New Zealand dollars to 35 New Zealand dollars. Hostel or holiday park double room with shared bathroom per night, 80 New Zealand dollars to 90 New Zealand dollars. Hostel, motel or holiday park ensuite double room per night, 90 New Zealand dollars to 120 New Zealand dollars. Campervan powered site per two people per night, 22 New Zealand dollars to 40 New Zealand dollars. Department of Conservation, DOC, campsite per person per night, 15 New Zealand dollars. Motel self-contained unit per two people per night, 140 New Zealand dollars. Hotel double room per night, 160 New Zealand dollars. Activities budget. Hiking trails, free. Skydive from 15,000 feet, 339 New Zealand dollars to 439 New Zealand dollars. Bungee jump, 150 New Zealand dollars to 290 New Zealand dollars. Whitewater rafting, 100 New Zealand dollars to 140 New Zealand dollars. Jet boat, 80 New Zealand dollars to 130 New Zealand dollars. Dolphin swimming, 110 New Zealand dollars to 160 New Zealand dollars. Whale watching, 120 New Zealand dollars to 160 New Zealand dollars. Glacier hiking, 390 New Zealand dollars to 470 New Zealand dollars. Cruise in Milford Sound, 60 New Zealand dollars to 100 New Zealand dollars. Rotorua Geothermal Park, 30 New Zealand dollars to 70 New Zealand dollars. Horse trekking, 50 New Zealand dollars to 150 New Zealand dollars. Canyoning, 150 New Zealand dollars to 300 New Zealand dollars. Hobbiton, 80 New Zealand dollars to 100 New Zealand dollars. Glowworm caving, 125 New Zealand dollars to 280 New Zealand dollars. Great Walk hut per night, 32 New Zealand dollars to 110 New Zealand dollars. That's it for this article. Hit like and subscribe to say thank you, and remember, this article is available for free on nzpocketguide.com. Check out the link in the description. Plus, there are thousands of articles for you to plan the perfect New Zealand holiday.